Jeffrey? Thank you. Thanks for greeting already each other. Bob, turn to each other and say, Sabubona, I see you. Sabubona, I see you. Look each other in the eyes.
That's the first one. I see you.
The response is, I wouldn't exist if you wouldn't see me.
Yeah, what do you say? How do you say the other?
I don't know how to do it. That's a Zulu language I'm not familiar with. Okay. That's great. Okay, for the ones who don't know me, my name is Memo. I'm one of the pastors of this church. I just recently came to Canada, so if my language is not really proper, so it's because of that. I'm still learning and still need to improve and develop. You can help me with that, correct me if I'm wrong. And there's definitely always something wrong. So, yeah, I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to be part of this church, to be part of this community. And I need to apologize first, because the sermon is not a preaching itself like I used to do. It's more like a teaching, and I'm sorry for that. But it's important. The topic is really, really great, amazing. I love it. And sometimes, if you like me, I sometimes forget the basics, and the basics are sometimes the most precious things, the most beautiful things. And we just take it for granted, and we just go over it, and just pass it, and it's gone, and we didn't realize how beautiful it is. Do you know what the most important question of your life is? The most important question of your whole life, and for everyone in this room. Any idea? It's pretty easy. It's a basic thing. You know it. Yeah, it's the right direction. But Claudia already mentioned it. Who is Jesus? Who is Jesus? Who is Jesus? Everything in our life and everything in eternity determine how we answer this question. Everything in your life and everything in eternity is determined by how we answer this question. So, who is God? Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ. Who is Jesus? In the summer we had a sermon series. We had our series where we looked at the 7 wonderful I am statements in the Gospel of John. I am the bread of life, and so on. And it was a wonderful series. But Jesus is much more than those 7 I am statements. He is so much more than that. Every Gospel is written to answer. We have 4 of them: Matthew, Mark, John, and Luke. And every one of them is written to answer exactly this question: who is Jesus? That's the purpose. That's the meaning behind it. That's why they wrote the Gospel. And two of them even begin with the genealogy of Jesus. Matthew and Luke. They start with the genealogy of Jesus to answer the question right at the beginning: who is Jesus? The Gospel of John starts a little different. The very first verse in the Gospel, it says, in the Gospel of John, in the beginning was the Word Jesus. And the Word Jesus, he was with God, the Father. And the Word Jesus was God, the Father. There's another passage in the same Gospel where Jesus is just very openly saying, the Father and I, we are one. Who is Jesus? Jesus is God. That's who he is. In Mark chapter 4, we read, they were terrified. We have the situation where Jesus comes as strong, and even the fishermen were so terrified, they were so anxious, they thought they would die. And they wake up Jesus, and Jesus, he calms the storm. And they said, the response was, they were terrified and asked each other, who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him. Who is Jesus? He has the power and the authority over nature. That's who he is. Jesus standing in front of Pilate. He was in prison, he was captured, he was for no reason, because they hated him, they wanted to get rid of him. And they brought him to Pilate, and then Pilate went back inside the palace, and he called Jesus and he asked him, are you the king of the Jews? Are you the king of the Jews? And Jesus answers, my kingdom is not of this world. Who is Jesus? He's the king. He's your king. He's our king. That's who he is. And even John the Baptist is asking the question. So many people from many directions, the question is coming. Who is this one? Who is this Jesus? The disciples, Pilate, John the Baptist, and so many more. And Pilate is in prison. John the Baptist is in prison. Herod, the king, he put him into prison, and afterwards he even killed him. But John the Baptist has a moment of doubts where he's not really sure. And so he sent his disciples to Jesus and with the message or with the question, are you the one who is to come, or should we expect someone else? Who is Jesus? He is the one we are all waiting for. We're all waiting for. He is the one who was promised. That's who Jesus is. Another passage, chapter 26 in the Gospel of Matthew. Jesus in front of the high priest, religious elite, and they were accusing him, trying to kill him, and Jesus, he remained silent. And the high priest said to him, I charge you under oath by the living God, tell us if you are the Messiah, the Son of God. Who are you? Who is Jesus? He is the Son of the living God. His response is, you have said so. I am. I am the Son of God. And even, and the interesting thing is, so from many directions, people were asking this question, wondering, who is this guy? And even God makes statements about Jesus Christ. He says in Matthew 3, and a voice came from heaven after he was baptized by John the Baptist. And a voice from heaven came and said, this is my son whom I love. With him I am well pleased. God is confirming. God is making a statement. He is my son, the Son of the living God. And in chapter 17, the same gospel, Matthew chapter 17, we go, a little later we go deeper into this passage. But while they were still speaking on the mountain of transfiguration, a bright cloud covered them, and a voice from the cloud said, this is my son whom I love. With him I am well pleased. Listen to him. Confirmation, a statement from God itself. Now all of this is great and amazing, and the 7 I am statements, wonderful. But I want to talk about something we haven't mentioned yet. And I want to emphasize another aspect here in this sermon. A core, a deep, primary core, is that the right way to say it? Maybe the most important aspect of his person that we have not looked into so far, but which has the greatest influence on our lives. The greatest influence on our lives. Before we read the passage, the Bible passage, I would like to share the context of the situation with you. Jesus in Galilee, where he spent most of the time of his life with the disciples around the Sea of Galilee and the cities, and where he did his ministry, and he preached the gospel, he heals the blind, he makes the lame walk, he cleans the lepers, he makes the deaf hear, wonder, miracles after miracles. He raises the dead and proclaims the good news to the poor. And people come from everywhere to see him. And many of them were looking for help, and he's constantly surrounded by a huge crowd of people. And then Jesus fed the 4,000 men, besides women and children, so altogether probably 10,000 people, with just a few pieces of bread and a few small pieces of fish, and he satisfies them. And it's amazing. Then we read he went with his disciples to the region of Magadan, which is also at the Sea of Galilee. Oh, that was a mistake. Sorry. It's here, right at the Sea of Galilee. He went with his disciples to the region of Magadan, and we read as they were crossing the lake. So what comes next is they're crossing the lake. Then they travel to the other side. They cross the lake from this side to the other side. This is something, by the way, this is something Jesus always or often does to get away from the crowds, to get away from all the busyness, and find a quiet time of rest or to teach the disciples something. And they were crossing the lake. On the other side of the lake, they traveled to Caesarea Philippi, which is from this point to this point over here, 30 miles. He's traveling with them all the way up to Caesarea Philippi. And it's a very mountainous region, exactly where Mount Hermon is. Hermon, it's over here on Hermon, 2,800 meters high. So the highest point of the East Mediterranean side. So it's interesting. So I have a picture. This is where I went, Caesarea Philippi. This is Mount Hermon. These are some other locations. This is how it looks like. So let's read what happened there. Matthew chapter 16, verse 30 to 21. And I need someone to help me with reading it, please. If someone would be willing to read it out loud, it would be really helpful. Chapter 16, verse 30 to 21.
13 to 21?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
When Jesus came into the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, saying, "Who do men say that I, the Son of Man, am?" So they said, "Some say John the Baptist, some Elijah, and others Jeremiah, or one of the prophets." He said to them, "But who do you say that I am?" Simon Peter answered and said, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." Jesus answered and said to him, "Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. And I also say to you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades shall not prevail against it. And I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whether you bind on earth and will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven." Then he commanded his disciples that they should tell no one that he was Jesus the Christ. From that time Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things for the elders and chief priests and scribes, and be killed and be raised the third day. Then Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him, saying, "Far be it from you, Lord, this shall not happen to you." But he turned and said to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan. You are an offense to me, for you are not mindful of the things of God, but the things of men." 23.
Thank you so much. This is the first time that Jesus took all his disciples, the 12 of them, and that he decided to move away from the preaching, from the crowds, from the place he was in Galilee, and to go somewhere else the first time. And he didn't tell anyone where he was going. Only he and his disciples, just a small group, to get away from all this. Why did Jesus decide to go there with his disciples? What was the reason? It makes it read for me. It was like it's a secret mission. There's a secret mission going on. He wants to get away from the crowd and everything. Go to a place where he was never before with his disciples on a mountainous area, and it sounds like a secret mission. And it seems as if Jesus is looking for a safe environment, a secret place where he can talk to his disciples very important issues, undisturbed. So the thing is, he wants to be undisturbed, not being distracted, and he wants to talk about things with the disciples that only concern the disciples and him. That's his purpose, the reason why he's going there. And we are the same. I mean, if we have something important to say to somebody, we took him aside, right? We go to somewhere else where we have a quiet place, where there's no disturbance, and we can talk the topic with each other. That's what we also do. And Jesus travels even 30 miles to speak to them in private, and he gets straight to the point. What is the word on the street about me? What are people talking about? What is the word on the street about me? He's not asking because he's concerned about what people might think of him. He doesn't care. Like, we would generally be concerned about, I would feel that way. I would be concerned about when we ask somebody, what does somebody think of me? What does Andy think of me? So it feels like, okay, maybe I'm concerned about what he thinks of me. That's not the point. That's not what Jesus is asking. The disciples answered, well, you know, some were saying you are Elijah. And some say you are John the Baptist. And some say you are Jeremiah. Some say and believe that you are one of the good prophets, or a good teacher, or this guy, or that guy. So there are many, many opinions, many things they think about Jesus. By the way, John the Baptist, he was dead at this point already. The King Herod killed him. Jeremiah, dead. Elijah, dead. But he's asking this question to the believers. He's asking his disciples. So, who is this Jesus? This question was put to the main guys. He's talking to his disciples. What is the word on the street? Okay, but now to you. You are my disciples. I'm talking to you. Who do you say that I am? He says, okay, thank you so much for the intel and what the world thinks about me, as incorrect as it is, but what do you guys say? Who do you think that I am? Jesus wants us individually. He wants each of us individually. And the question is, what do you think? Who do you think Jesus is? You know, some of us bank on what our grandparents told us about Jesus, said about Jesus, our parents, our pastor, our friends maybe, what they said about Jesus. That's great, that's amazing. I appreciate what they say, but what do you say? Because this, like I said in the beginning, this is the most important question you will ever face in your life. Who is Jesus for you? It's the most important thought that we will ever think. Who is Jesus for you? So because of that, he makes it very personal. Memo, let's make it personal. Memo, that's me. Who do you think that I am? Who do you think that I am? Or fill your name into it. Like, Hannah, who do you think Jesus is for you? Gary, Jeffrey, Chris. Who do you think Jesus is for you? Peter, Rob. Who is Jesus for you? And he points the question to the disciples, and Peter, like always, he speaks up for the whole group, and he says his very famous words recorded in verse 16, you are the Christ, you are the Son of the living God. Christ means Messiah. Messiah means the anointed one. You are the anointed one. That's who you are. What he's saying is, with his professional faith, Peter is saying, Jesus was the fulfillment of all the more than 300 prophecies of the Old Testament. So many prophecies, and you are the fulfillment of each and every one of them. Peter was recognizing, you are the one who fulfilled all these prophetic references. You are the Christ. You are the anointed one. You are the Messiah. You are the Son of the living God. You are the one the people of Israel and the whole world, all nations, were waiting for centuries. Finally, you are here. You are the one we have waited for. And Peter is right. He's correct. But he and his disciples, his colleagues, the other disciples, they still had a limited understanding of what that means and what the consequences were for Jesus. And we're coming closer to the point I want to emphasize. Therefore, for the first time since they met, Jesus gives them a deeper insight and shows them what is about to happen. For the first time, he explains to them that he will be killed in Jerusalem. They're going to kill him. He will be killed by the leaders of the people and the religious elite in Jerusalem. And he adds, but don't tell anyone. It's a secret. It's a secret mission. It's a secret place we are together, and it's between you and me. I'm just telling you this information. Don't share it with anybody. That's why I brought you here. That's why we came here. This is the secret conversation at this point. Don't tell anyone. Or in his words, in verse 20, then he ordered his disciples not to tell anyone that he was the Messiah. The Messiah, the anointed one. the anointed one, he will be killed in Jerusalem. The first time he's talking about that. After 6 days, then he goes into even more detail in an astonishing and supernatural way. Just a few days later, and I need your help again with reading the passage. Let's read the passage, chapter 17, Matthew 17, verse 1 to 9. Please help me. Whoever is ready can just start.
After 6 days, Jesus took with him Peter, James, and John, the brother of James, and he led them up a high mountain by themselves. There he was transfigured before them, his face shone like the sun, and his clothes became as white as the light. Just then there appeared before them Moses and Elijah talking with Jesus. Peter said to Jesus, "Lord, it is good for us to be here. If you wish, I will put up 3 shelters, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." While he was still speaking, a bright cloud covered them, and a voice from the cloud said, "This is my son, whom I love. With him I am well pleased. Listen to him." When the disciples heard this, they fell face down to the ground, terrified. But Jesus came up and touched them. "Get up," he said. "Don't be afraid." When they looked up, they saw no one except Jesus. I'm sorry, one more time. What verse 2?
Sure now.
9? As they were coming down the mountain, Jesus instructed them, "Don't tell anyone what you have seen until the Son of Man has been raised from the dead."
Thank you so much. What Jesus does is exactly what he did before. He leaves the place where he was to get to a even more secret place, even more private place. And he goes up the mountain, the high mountain, it says, with even a smaller number of people. Not all disciples, just 3 of them. Jacob, John, and Peter. A place where they can be undisturbed. And why? For the same reason. To help them understand and answer the question, who is Jesus? Who am I? I'm going to help you to understand this. That's what Jesus is doing. Let's go up the mountain, and I'm going to help you to understand who I am, who I really am. Another secret meeting takes place. And it all shows how important this whole trip is for Jesus. It's a very, very important trip for him, and especially for the disciples. In the Gospel of John, we read, when Jesus arrived at the top of the mountain, he first took time to pray. That's interesting. And the disciples knew that once Jesus started praying, it will take a while, so we can take a nap. That's what they do. If Jesus starts praying, it takes a while. So they relaxed and eventually fell asleep. And while they slept, Jesus was praying and he was transfigured. And he suddenly, that's what the text says, he suddenly shines like the sun, the bright light. And what happens if the sun suddenly shines into your face? You wake up, right? It's dark, and suddenly bright light, the sun shines into your face, you wake up, and that's what happened. And they see Jesus in his amazing glory. The fact that he changes his form, he was covered in light, that he changed his form shows that he's more than just a man. Jesus is more than a man. The disciples could see that. And the fact that Moses and Elijah met him in this situation shows his messianic status. He is the anointed one. And the voice of God speaking into this situation shows that he is the Son of God. Moses and Elijah, what did they talk about? This passage only says they were talking with Jesus. But again, in Luke 9:30, we get a little more information. And behold, 2 men were talking with him, Moses and Elijah, who appeared in glory and spoke of his, pay attention, and spoke of his departure, which he was about to accomplish at Jerusalem. They were talking about his suffering. They were talking about him getting killed. And on the way down, Jesus told them again. They were coming down the mountain. Jesus instructed them, don't tell anyone. This is between you and me. Don't tell anyone what you have seen until the Son of Man has been raised from the dead. He's again talking about his suffering. The anointed one will suffer. He will die. They will kill him. This was a secret meeting. Don't tell anyone. Keep it for yourself. Why Moses and Elijah? That's very interesting. Why Moses and Elijah? Moses is a representative of the law, the Old Testament. Elijah is a representative of the prophets. The law and the prophets. The law and the prophets. And they should come seeing them, the presence of Moses and Elijah should serve to the point to Jesus once again to show clearly that he is the Messiah, he is the Redeemer, he is the fulfillment of all that has been promised. In Mark chapter 5, I know a lot of passages, but sorry for that, it's really to highlight a few things. Matthew 5, it says, "Do not think that I've come to abolish the law or the prophets." Jesus is talking. The law and the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. And on this Mount of Transfiguration, we see Elijah and Moses as representatives of law and the prophets. And they, Moses and Elijah, confirmed to the disciples that Jesus is the Savior. You know, you need to testify in the Old Testament and even in the New Testament to testify something. You need how many witnesses? 2 or 3. How many witnesses do we have? Moses, Elijah, and even God confirming, this is my son. You have here a statement, a confirmation of who Jesus is. We have 2 things going here. The reason for this journey with his disciples. To answer the question, who is Jesus? He is the Messiah. He is the anointed one. And to reveal to them, to explain to them that the Messiah, he will suffer and he will die. That's what's going to happen. Everything that happens, he is making clear to everything that happens here is aimed at making it clear to the disciple that he is the Messiah, the anointed one, and that he must die as such. What he's trying to tell them is the Messiah is the Lamb. That's who he is. We haven't talked about that. We have talked about a lot of things in context with Jesus, of who he is. But that's who he really is. Jesus is the Lamb. I am the Lamb who came to die for you. I am the man, the Lamb who came to pay the ransom for you, to set you free, to help you find forgiveness and reconciliation. That's what he came for. And for this reason, he had to die. He had to pay the price. Jesus is God, and God is the Lamb. That's what we believe. That's what Jesus tried to explain to them. God gave his life for us. He is the Lamb. But Jesus cannot, at this point, Jesus cannot say it openly. He cannot talk openly about it. Because if Satan and his helpers would know about them, what would happen? They would use all their power to prevent Jesus from dying. They would use all their power and all their influence to do everything in their power to keep him alive. That is why Jesus undertook this journey, and keep it secret, and keep it private. That is why he took the disciples aside. That is why he told them to keep everything they heard for themselves. Everything they saw, to keep it for themselves. And just wait until I am raised from the dead. Then you can start talking about it. But not now. And the only one who knew exactly who Jesus was from the very beginning, that's amazing. You know who it was? Any idea? The only one who truly knew who Jesus was from the very beginning was John the Baptist. In chapter 1 in the Gospel of John, and the Gospel of John, it says, the next day, John saw Jesus coming towards him and said, look, the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world. Who is God? Jesus Christ. Who is Jesus Christ? He is the Lamb. God became flesh and he paid for me. He paid for me. God became the Lamb and he died for me personally. This is the greatest message of history. There's no greater. When we think of all the I am statements, when they come to your mind, and many more, but the most, they're all true, they're all wonderful, but the most accurate description of who he is we see in this picture. The most accurate description of Jesus Christ is this. He saved my life, he saved your life. That's why he came. And he's no action hero fighting his enemy with weapons. No, he's the Lamb. And let's close with reading another passage, the last one. Let's close the sermon with reading the last passage from Revelation chapter 5. I need another one, please. You can help me read it. Chapter 5, verse 1 till 10. A wonderful description of who Jesus is.
Then I saw on the right hand of him who sat on the throne a scroll with writing on both sides, and sealed with 7 seals. And I saw a mighty angel proclaiming in a loud voice, "Who is worthy to break the seals and open the scroll?" But no one in heaven or on earth or under the earth could open the scroll or even look inside it. I wept and wept because no one was found who was worthy to open the scroll or look inside. Then one of the elders said to me, "Do not weep. See, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the Root of David, has triumphed. He is able to open the scroll and its 7 seals." Then I saw a lamb, looking as if it had been slain, standing at the center of the throne, encircled by the 4 living creatures and the elders. The lamb had 7 horns and 7 eyes, which are the 7 spirits of God sent out into all the earth. He went and took the scroll from the right hand of him who sat on the throne. And when he had taken it, the 4 living creatures and the 24 elders fell down before the lamb. Each one had a harp, and they were holding golden bowls full of incense, which are the prayers of God's people. And they sang a new song, saying, "You are worthy to take the scroll and open its seals because you were slain. And with your blood you purchased for God persons from every tribe and language and people and nation. You have made them to be a kingdom and priests to serve our God, and they will reign on the earth."
Thank you so much. Then I saw a lamb looking at it if it had been slain, standing at the center of the throne, encircled by the 4 living creatures and the elders. That's who he is. That's how the Bible describes him. And the most accurate description of who he is we see, like I said, we see in this picture. Let me pray.